Thinking about what I would say to my 20-year-old self is don't be afraid of failure, or what looks like failure at the time is actually the biggest learning curve.
I think, trust your intuition, lean into the things that you enjoy and that you find out you're good at. And if there are things that are draining and that you don't enjoy, then, sort of de-emphasise those in the choices that you're making in your career.
Don't feel like you have to have a plan and stick to the plan. If things deviate or opportunities come into your periphery, be open to say yes.
You know what? There's a bit of competition coming on.
What we have to do as leaders is to support them by giving them the trust.
Today, I am time travelling with 4 high-performing female sales leaders and asking them what would they tell the 20-year-old versions of themselves. Fee, what would you tell the 20-year-old version of yourself?
Just go with that confidence. Yeah, be confident. Don't worry about other people raising eyebrows, especially older people raising eyebrows about your confidence. It's not an insult if they say they're overly confident. If you continue to be confident and continue to demonstrate that you're going to push on through, you'll be consistently confident and you'll be consistent, and consistency is key.
I love that. Penny, that reminds me of something we were talking about a little bit here, where you were saying when you were young, in your 20s, you did feel you had some confidence.
Yeah, because candidly, when we were talking about questions you were going to ask before, one of the things I said was actually, I think I was incredibly confident at 20, probably punching above my weight in terms of what I thought I could do. Actually, that's not fair. I shouldn't say that. But yes, I was very confident. I did feel, though, over the course of the years, and now my 51-year-old self, that some of my confidence has eased off during my 30s or various points in my career. And we were talking about that.
Yeah.
And so if I went back to my 20-year-old self, yes, I was confident. I think trying to remember that far back, it was before my career, it would just be, again, a little bit what Fee was saying. Take that leap of faith, be bold, go for it. But I think for me, those things weren't necessarily a problem then. It was a bit later on.
It's a similar theme, to be honest. I think just being more vocal about my ambition and my aspirations as I went out into the workforce. I think, like Penny, I didn't have any problem with that at school or at university. I was surrounded by smart, ambitious, driven people, and I wasn't apologetic about my aspirations. And I think somehow I lost that in my 20s, and I didn't really want to kind of be seen as raising my hand too much. I'm not sure why that was. Inside, that ambition was absolutely there, but I found it hard to vocalise it. So fast forward to my 30s, I very narrowly avoided missing out on my first leadership role as a result of that. I had an opportunity to move into a VP of EMEA role. I knew interviews were underway. The SVP who ran all of international was in London, and I asked him how the interviews were going. And he said they were going great, but he hadn't found the ideal candidate. And I said, in that case, I'd like to put my hat into the ring. And he said, oh, my goodness, we've been waiting for you to say that. And it turned out that they were waiting for me to raise my hand because they wanted to see the confidence. I've coached so many people, by the way, not to do this.
This is weird. That same thing happened to me. Exactly the same thing.
Yeah. I was waiting until I was 100% there.
Yeah.
And I thought, because they hadn't asked me if I wanted to apply, that I clearly wasn't ready. So, yeah, definitely vocalise, put your hand up for the promotion. That would be my advice.
There is something around, I'd written signpost where you want to go as my second thing to my 20-year-old self. When you're a bit younger, you're told quite a lot that you're young. You've been told for the first 15 years that you can remember of your life, you're too young, you're not quite ready to do X, Y, and Z. And then into your career, it continues. So you have these secret plans that you don't tell anyone about. I want to be, but I'm not going to tell anyone because they're going to tell me I'm too young, too inexperienced, not good enough. But if you signpost it and say, this is where I want to go, and I know it's ambitious, and I know it's not within my reach right now, but I promise you that's where I want to be, people will get on the journey with you and support you. More people will help you than stop you as long as you tell them where you're off to. I thoroughly believe in that.
Okay, would you see that?
For me, something that has stayed with me my entire career, and to my detriment in my 20s, was be curious. So I've always been a very naturally curious person about everything. And I went to university and I didn't, what do you want to be when you grow up? I had no idea. And I went and did a business degree. And during my first year of the business degree, I got a job. I joined sports teams. I had this idea to start my own business designing lingerie. And so I kind of like started planning this idea of designing my own lingerie and was really curious about what would that do. And basically all the year of my first year at university, I was so busy being curious about all the other things. I failed my first year at university, which was incredible. And I went to the dean of the university and said, look, I have spent my first year trying to build a business selling bras, and I've got no idea if this is a thing, but I think I still want to do my degree. And they were amazing. They said, well, stay on campus, stay for another year, and you can stay in halls and you can do your first year again and pass the modules that you failed. And I was like, okay, actually, that would be great. And so I stayed for another year and realised I couldn't start this business. I couldn't get the capital off the ground and I couldn't actually do it. But took that learning into my business degree and then flew and grew with it. And I turned my 4-year degree into, 5-year degree was supposed to into 6 years. But that curiosity at the time I felt like had hurt me, had held me back. It was actually something that was going to be damaging to me. But it has led me to a whole career of being curious. So always go with that. Be curious.
And just to build on that, because I love that. You're always good at telling stories, Kate. But actually, thinking about what I would say to my 20-year-old self is don't be afraid of failure, or what looks like failure at the time is actually the biggest learning curve. And the amount of times I think when I look back at my 20s, I may have held myself back in certain aspects. So, for example, I had a massive fear of public speaking. And when I think about my first role in sales at a place called R.R. Donnelley and then Merrill, I would do anything to avoid presenting internally. I was fine with clients, but if it was internal, for some reason, I was worried about being judged. It was a very male-dominated environment. There were mostly guys there, but I'm not blaming it on there being a male-dominated environment. It was my own self. I hadn't invested in public speaking enough and that skill, and I sort of underestimated internally how important that was for a promotion. Because actually, when you're at these events, you're presenting in front of managers and peers, and they hear your voice. Often they don't hear you when you're in front of a customer. Now, I was number one rep. I'd done all the numbers. They spoke for themselves. So that was good. But I still hadn't really invested that time to stand up and make myself be counted in front of all my colleagues. And I think that held me back internally. And I underestimated internally how important it is to build that internal reputation in an organisation, particularly in the early stages or any part of your career.
So there's something in this, like very actionable in what I'm hearing, which is like, first off, confidence. Have more confidence in yourself, believe in yourself. I know there's data to support this, but there's this idea that men, when applying for jobs, see themselves, they see that they're short of the qualifications, but they lean in. Whereas females, when they go for the jobs, they tend to lean out. I think maybe it's 120. It's like an 80%. Or we even have it in our job descriptions that we have like a line in it to say.
We do. Yeah,
great, right? So that's something there. And then I love what you said around signposting. I really believe in this whole idea of like manifesting and positive thinking, that sort of thing. And so there's almost like a lesson here for the 20-year-old versions of themselves, or the people in their 20s listening along now, of like, okay, we'll have confidence, but like manifest that confidence into where you want to go. And, and then, if it is a leadership role, if it is a field sales position, whatever it is, like, let's start to put those things down and then tell the people around you.
Yeah. And then be open to, if it looks like it's not working or it's not going as planned, be open to the fact that that's okay. That's life. It can take different directions. It's not necessarily a failure.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think, trust your intuition, lean into the things that you enjoy and that you find out you're good at. And if there are things that are draining and that you don't enjoy, then, sort of de-emphasize those in the choices that you're making in your career. I spent 3 years at university studying law. I wanted to be a barrister. That wasn't a path that I went down. I ended up moving into a sales and marketing role in a technology company. It wasn't called tech then, it was called IT, who built solutions for law firms. So that was my kind of entry in there. And I think I spent most of my 20s kind of looking back over my shoulder, feeling that I'd somehow let myself down and that sales was a lesser career than going into the legal profession. And boy, oh boy, I mean, I'm really glad that I made that decision and it's worked out pretty nicely. But my 20-year-old self didn't have that same sense of kind of belief in kind of that intrinsic kind of, intuition that I was picking up on, that wasn't going to be a good fit for me.
Yeah, well, that belief thing and that's what you were talking about, like self-belief around curiosity. And it turned out, in your case, as you said, to be wrong. What other beliefs did you have in your 20s that you feel turned out to be wrong?
a thing that you have to have a plan. You know, when I went to university and I chose to do my business degree, it was like, right, well, I'm going to go into business, and then I'm going to, you know, and I'm totally on board with what you're saying in terms of vision it and manifest it, but also don't have a plan.
Yeah.
Just go with it. I got given a piece of advice when I left university because I was like, oh, with a very generic business degree, I could have gone marketing, I could have gone HR, I could have gone sales. You know, there were so many options on the table. And I sat down with the lecturer and said, I just don't quite know what I could do. And he said to me, the beauty is you don't have to choose, and go and be curious. And I took it literally. My career started in sales, and then I got an opportunity to go and work in another sales role, but I also had an opportunity to work in supply chain, and I went and did supply chain. And from there, I went into branding and marketing. And then from there, I got given a job as head of marketing for Dyson, which was completely crazy. And then from there into tech sales. So that curiosity and breadth of experience has really enabled me to have a very different perspective on a business. And when I talk to companies and customers, you know, to really understand who they are and what the challenges might be. So don't feel like you have to have a plan, and stick to the plan. If things deviate or opportunities come into your periphery, be open to say yes. I think that's really important. Be open to say yes.
I also think that people watching this podcast, if you are in your 20s, you're going to have a different set of circumstances and environments and upbringing to any of us, let's be honest. And when I filter out actually sort of some of the stuff that we probably felt or our experiences compared to now a 20-year-old, they've been subjected to a lot of online media, and you must be instantaneously successful, you must be an influencer, you could be a multimillionaire just by sort of speaking around content or being an influencer. And I think that the pressures on that generation are enormous. And so when I think about the tools as a 20-year-old for us that will actually stand the test of time now, I feel like it's take the pressure off. You're absolutely right. There is no point in having a plan, but a couple of things that you should definitely do is work hard, work longer, because I feel like there's an expectation that we can, sales, you can get rich quick if you're a salesperson. You can't. You have to work so hard.
It's in any profession. I think this is really important. It is. You get out. I keep telling my children, you get out what you put in. You just got to work harder than the next person, smarter than the next person. If that's what you want to be successful. And I think you're right. That's lost and it's going to be a bit hard, and you're going to get stressed, and that's okay, right? That could be a driver. You're going to have to work longer hours sometimes.
Left the office, and you'll still be there, and that's great. That doesn't matter. It will pay back. I promise. It will pay back. So I think that remains the same for sure.
I'm just going to build on that point, because one of the other things I would probably say is that there are going to be people who will influence you. There's more now in this generation. There's more exposure to what everyone else's life looks like. That FOMO, that, oh my goodness, I'm not doing as well as that person. Yeah. That person's doing well. And we had that when we were younger. Yeah. They still have that now from people talking to you, but that's amplified. And so if I was to say any advice, it's just stay true to yourself and try and filter out the noise. It'll always be there. It'll always be there to bring you down or change your mind or think that maybe you're not good enough, but you have to. That's what we mean by self-belief. It's this ability, I think, where I see people really successful, this ability to stay quite focused and believe in themselves to move forward. And then the other thing is sort of how quickly you can pick yourself up again as well, because life isn't perfect.
Yeah, I think the sooner you can learn, what resilience looks like for you and what your coping mechanisms are. That was definitely something that I was thinking of when I was reflecting and thinking, what advice would I give? What we do in sales is hard. Leadership's hard. And, keeping your energy, your emotional energy, keeping the stamina can be really difficult in moments of stress. And I think there were times in my 20s and 30s where I didn't create the right boundaries. The days got longer. The travel got excessive at times. There were times when, I had very young children where I could have explained how much I was struggling, but chose not to for fear that it was a sign of weakness. And I think sort of in my 40s, I've definitely learned how to create those boundaries. And in those moments of stress, doubling down on exercise, making sure I get good sleep, like accepting that I don't want to do anything at the weekend other than just chill out at home. And that's all fine. And I've learned those things, but I wish I'd learned them earlier in my career, to be honest.
I suppose the question then is, if you're thinking about what Fee's saying, so I'm just more just between saying someone's listening to this and they're in their 20s and we're saying work hard.
Yeah.
But create boundaries. What does that look like then? Yeah.
There. My view on this is absolutely work hard, but make sure you're working in the right thing. Yes. And I don't know if you've heard of this Greek word, Meraki. Have you heard of this word? Meraki, I love Meraki. So Meraki, it means to put yourself into your work, like put love, put your personality, put yourself into what you do. And I think if you're working in an environment that's Meraki, you can work hard because it's not work. And I think the litmus test here is, if you get to Sunday night and you are dreading your week ahead, you are not in Meraki, you're in some toxic environment, and it doesn't matter how hard you work, you're never going to flourish. You are never going to flourish, you are never going to progress, and you're never going to grow. So if you're in that scenario, check in on yourself on a Sunday. Am I in Meraki? No. Get out. Yeah. And get out quick. And that's a mistake I made in my 20s. I worked for a really toxic female leader who bullied me, actively bullied me, and completely annihilated my confidence. And it didn't matter how hard I worked. I could be in the office till 10 o'clock at night. It was never enough. Right. It was never good enough, and I was never going to be promoted. And the way that I overcame that was I sought new champions and stakeholders around the business and had an opportunity to prove my value in other areas, and got an opportunity to leave that team and go to another team where I flourished and I grew. So absolutely, you've got to work hard. You've got to be in a place where you can bring your heart and your soul.
I completely agree with you. I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate on this one. I think when you're starting your career, having that ability to choose the perfect environment or a better environment is harder, right? I think, so what do we say to people who might be in a challenging environment, but it's a really good opportunity and role? Is there a place where you think you can kind of fight through it? And I'll put an example from myself. So Fee and I worked together in 2 companies actually, and
I was toxic.
Yeah, very toxic, Fee. Yeah, no, but we worked in an environment. There was a huge opportunity. It was enterprise selling. It was in the city. It was in it was 99 when I started, giving away my age. But it was a huge earning opportunity, huge learning opportunity, pretty toxic environment. I made the decision to stick at it because I had a huge opportunity, because I was given some very big accounts and I could bring in, quite frankly, 10 million in my first year, right? So that was a big opportunity. And I decided to plow through it and made, honestly, a lot of money and learned a lot and was very successful. When I look back at it, I think I made quite a lot of learnings with that, but I think that's but it also took its toll on me. But I stayed in that environment for 15 years. Possibly that was maybe too long. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think it's a balance, isn't it? It sounds like there was enough reward there, first off, for you to be able to kind of work through that and think, do you know what, I'm actually going to put up with this because I'm getting a lot of money and a lot of learnings as well. And I also think it's down to the individual, what one individual may be able to work through and cope with, their coping mechanisms and kind of tolerance for that level of stress may be much higher than somebody else's. So I think it's very individual. I think what has changed is I think there was almost a fear of moving between roles too quickly. I think when I first went out into the workforce, you really had to be seen to be doing 4 or 5 year minimums. Otherwise, someone was going to scrutinise you, your CV when you went for a new job. And I'm so glad that has changed now. We see people that are moving every couple of years. building different skill sets, exposing themselves to different experiences like you did, and which probably wouldn't have been so much the norm, I think, certainly when I went into the workforce. And I think that's great. That's got to be a positive.
I'll take you back to what you said around the environment you were in. So you were in an organisation and you had you were in a toxic environment.
Yeah.
And it was down to your boss in this case. And you changed teams and flourished. And so that tells me in this instance, maybe not all instances, but in this instance, it was the relationship with the boss that was what made the toxic environment. So go back to the theme of 20-year-old self and talking to yourself. What do you think is more important? Is it the boss, so who you work for, or where you work?
When you're in an organisation and you are in a toxic environment, you need to look at what your end goal is. And your example, Penny, is a great one. You weren't going to grow in terms of maybe like promotion or learning anything from your manager, but what you were going to get was a paycheck at the end of it. So let's call it for what it is. You were there for the reason.
I did learn a lot, but yeah, your point. I mean, I learned a lot, but I got opportunity, but it wasn't through the boss. It was, yes, I had opportunity.
Yeah. Exactly. So there is a goal in that. If you're in an environment where there isn't that goal, and which was my scenario, right? I had, original plan was I was going to step into her shoes when she was going to retire. That was the whole kind of gig. And I very quickly realised that was never going to happen. And I didn't really want the role anyway. So there was no progression and there was no end goal or no reason for me to be resilient. At that point, yeah, you have to face an option. This is where we have such high attrition rates where people go, actually, I give up, I'm going to leave. I could have done that, but actually I saw opportunity in the wider organisation and felt that if I moved to a different team and I could be successful in the team. The other thing is, the way that I moved was I was really honest and really vulnerable. So I opened up to several of the senior leaders to say, this is my experience. I'm really struggling. I am inexperienced. It was my second or third role out of university. I had no idea how to navigate this. This person was much more senior and I really didn't know what to do or how to navigate it, and literally said, I don't know what to do, but this is what I think I can do. How can I make that happen? And asked for the help and got that support to move. So I think it's individual. People leave roles because of bosses, not companies. But if you have an opportunity to stay in that organisation and work for a different boss and be honest and vulnerable about the situation, then people will help you.
I guess that goes back to the signposting.
Yeah.
So, you explain your circumstances, you explain your ambition, you explain anything. You just open yourself, be vulnerable. Like, I think at 20, you think, oh, I go to work and I'm going to put on a suit. Back then, we put on a skirt suit to make sure your skirt's not trousers.
Yeah.
But yeah, you put on a suit and you dress up in this garb, and you'd pretend to be someone that you're not. And I think the world has changed, and I think you need to go in and be authentic. And if that means you go in and say, today I'm not feeling great. This week I'm not feeling encouraged by my results. I feel like I could do better and I need help. People will help.
Absolutely. I mean, we all lead teams. I mean, that's the dream, isn't it? When you have a team that actually tells you how they're feeling, what their progression, plans are, then it becomes really easy, doesn't it? To stay aligned and to make sure that you're able to provide them with that platform or that extra bit of support. When it's hard as a leader is when you've got no idea what's going on kind of in their heads, in their world. That's much harder. So yeah, opening up actually makes it easier for leaders as well.
I have a boss at the moment and I always think that the first 10 seconds is like a therapy session, because he always kind of starts off with, and how are you? And then there's silence. So I'm like, fine, I'm absolutely fine. Okay, I'm not so fine. This is what's going on in my world. And then we solve things together. It's really interesting. But then I insist that others open up and are authentic. You just got to do it in practice yourself, don't you?
So, Fee, you've mentioned a word, one of my favourite words at the moment, which is authenticity, sort of a few times. And one of the things I was thinking is when you combine authenticity, which I think is very intangible. For me, authenticity is something we feel, but you couldn't say, oh, you're a 7 out of 10 authenticity, or what you said there was a 6 out of 10, whatever it was, right? And so it's an innate feeling. But then you also made this great point about the signposting. And what I was thinking was like, is there some sort of measures that are somewhere in between something as black and white as signposting, I want to be here by this point, and being authentic and, working hard is one of those things. So the effort in is definitely something you can kind of measure. What other things are there like that for a 20-something-year-old person listening along that I can, I could apply myself and sort of see as the sort of indicators or signals that I'm on the right path, so that when there are these more challenging scenarios in front of you, you can kind of see, you can sort of see past them and sort of see the goals of where you want to go.
I think it's, having that mission, that purpose. And that's certainly something that I've seen of, in team members that I've worked with, really separates a high performer from maybe an average or low performer. We will fail. We'll all fail. We'll all have, tough months, tough quarters. But the people that can really pick themselves up and kind of start again is because they've got that longer term plan in mind and that longer term goal. And they feel connected to that. I think it is that connection, sense of purpose and the long-term mission that they're kind of driving towards.
I'm getting deep into visualization at the moment, probably because of what I do for a living, which is visualization software. But deep into visualization, I think having a mind map of where you're going, and imagine it's like a computer game. And you specifically asked me, what are the key indicators that you're being successful in your goal and your mission? Is if you map that out, you've got yourself a business plan. I've written down, be your own business. You've got yourself a business plan. You've got a plan. It doesn't have to be, what you're doing, but a plan. And along your journey, along your map, as you go, a bit like a computer game, you're picking up people that are supporting you. So, ding, it's a bit like the Waze app, these little people on, and ding, you've got another one. You pick up people because you're signposting, you're mapping, you can visualize where you want to go, but also you just keep that map. And when you deviate off that map, allow yourself to deviate, but show where you might just meet that road again. But have it in your mind sight, have it in your head, and then explore it and send it out to the universe, manifest it, and pick up people along the way that are going to support you. That's, for me, your key indicator that there's 2 or 3 people who absolutely understand where you want to go. You can count them on your hand, at least one hand. There's 3 or 4 people of senior who you respect that understand where you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also add, I work with a coach actually around coming back to your point about purpose. There's plan, but there's also how do you work out what makes you tick, who you are? Because actually that is fundamental to your career choice and how you turn up at work and how you become authentic, right? And so I did some work, it took me about 2 decades to get to this point, but I did some work with a coach on purpose and your sort of life goals or life principles, guiding principles. And so to give you an example, 3 for me are, one is leaving a positive legacy. And that can be anything in life, to interaction with a person, to how I turn up in any sort of. So leave something better than when I found it if I can. Always operate with kindness and coming from a place of caring and kindness. And then make positive memories. And because those are the 3 things. And if you think about those 3 things or whatever your 3 things are that make you, really why you think you would to do the rocking chair test, what would that be that you would come to? And then really what you kind of do is think about how you operate and turn up based on those principles. And I think that for me, doing that work and figuring that out makes me think about how I interact with colleagues, how I turn up and think about my job, what I'm doing in my tasks, how I interact with my friends. And that then you get into that flow Meraki state. And I think that's coming into what you were saying earlier, which is then work is going to be stressful, but you're moving in a direction that works in conjunction with who you are and what you do. And I think that makes you more effective as well.
This is super interesting because my son is 19, so not quite 20, and he's at university and he's just started his 2nd year and he's struggling. And he's doing car design, which has been a dream, but always absolutely loves cars. Doesn't feel like he's keeping up with the course. Going to hate that, but I'm saying this. And fundamentally, it's just not the right fit for him. Yeah, he doesn't enjoy having to sit at a computer for the amount of hours that he's having to sit and use CAD. And it's just not quite as he imagined. And we had a chat the other evening and I said, if this is the fact that you're having to work hard and you're having to do things that are difficult, I said, that's something you have to lean into because that's something that you're going to have to do time and time again in life. But if this is something that fundamentally is not a good fit for you, what you enjoy, your skill sets, your natural attributes, then you absolutely need to make the right choice for you, and you can do anything that you want to. You do not have to stick at this. And it was a real moment for me as a parent, because I wasn't sure which, should I be encouraging him just to work a bit harder, or should I be empowering him and giving him permission to perhaps make the choice to drop out and do something different?
Yeah. Gave him two paths. I thought, it was brilliant. And you didn't tell, did he? Not do either. No, that's right. You can't. What's he leaning toward?
I think he's leaning towards leaving. So he's researching. I've told him he needs to give it until Christmas, and he needs to have a plan. He cannot drop out without a plan. So I think he's trying to do both of those things.
Something that we do is an energy audit. And it comes from Matt Moshry, who's a CEO coach. And the idea here is you, in a professional environment, you'd look at your schedule, your calendar, and say, look back maybe last month. And you just literally go for everything, and you have two columns. Does this give me energy, or does this take my energy? And the idea of that is it gives you a very clear black and white indicator of the things that give you energy. So if you apply that to your son's example, what things gives him energy? Well, it might be that there is still something in car design for him, but it's just not sat at a computer. It might be he's more creative, he wants to be involved in the non-technical side of things, or brand may be something for him, in the context of the 20-year-old self. Like if you're a 20-something-year-old person, you're saying, well, the thing that I really like doing is lifting people up with me, then that tells you that you should be on the career path to be a leader. If you're 20-year-old something and say, I just love being the best version of myself, I love it when I close deals, then stay in that lane. Your success doesn't have to be dictated by the scene hierarchy of your title.
Can I just build on that? Because you're so right. I'm coaching a lot of as part of the female sales leader, offering free coaching slots every quarter, and so I now think I've done 10 different women on top of my advisory work. And the common thing I'm seeing, and I coach or advise men and women, practically every single woman I've coached at the moment has thought they might not be good enough for leadership. Every single one. And then we go straight back to what you've done, which is what gives you energy, what's your life principles, let's work through your attributes. And almost every single one of them align to being a strong leader. Yeah. Yet they haven't been able to see it. It's fascinating for me that people don't seem to understand, okay, I know who I am, but what does that mean there for my career, what I'm good at?
That's great that you come back to the values, by the way. I did a course a few years ago with INSEAD on leading gender diversity, because I kept being asked to be part of kind of the women's groups and like a DocuSign, and I didn't feel like I had the vocabulary and the structure, the strategy. And one of the things that they'd identified was that their female MBA students were consistently being outperformed by the male MBA students. But coming into the course, everyone, they deserved to be there on merit, and everyone kind of had performed very similarly, in their previous careers. And so they couldn't quite understand what that was. But they had a sense that, the female candidates were perhaps unfairly measuring themselves against their peers, and a bit of imposter syndrome was potentially creeping in, and that was then impacting their performance. So they started to get them to do like the values assessment and questionnaire, and kind of made them really kind of go inward and really think about what it was that they wanted to achieve in their career. Once they started doing that gap massively reduced. I think in the first year it reduced by about 25%. So it was such an interesting experiment, and something that we could do where we see, sort of women taking that next step in their career.
And as a leader, really, a male or a female leader or any gender leader, when they think about their team and trying to think about career pathing and what putting things in the right flow state or environment, then I think, they need to do more of that. Yeah. I think a lot of managers just don't know how to do that. So coming back to your point, do people leave for bad bosses or organisations? I mean, it can be both.
Yes.
But most likely bosses. And I don't think there's enough management training. I just don't think middle managers, frontline managers are given the right tools to be the great managers. And I think it's really hard, particularly in sales, where you put your top performing individual contributor, clue in the eye, and then put them into a we, which is, okay, team. And you're thinking, well, suddenly I've gone from what works for me because I'm a rock star, so everyone else must do the same thing. And then you've got all these different individuals, or you either get lots of people like you in your sales team, which is a major mistake, because the team should reflect the audience, certainly, right? Yeah, and come with diverse thought. So there's this whole disconnect, and it's still really patchy in sales. They'll do loads of enablement for a sales team, but less for managers. Now, I know that depends on the maturity of an organisation. There are places like Salesforce will probably do that very well. But the ones I work with, which are sort of 5 to 200 million ARR, not so much.
Yeah,
not
yeah.
so much.
It's such a funny thing, as you say, with sales leaders. They're basically promoted into individuals are promoted to be sales leaders based on what we think is like 1/5 of what a sales leader should have, which is what we would call the tactics, right? The ability to know how to sell the craft, their industry, that type of thing. But the number one thing, and I think most people generally agree on this, that leaders have to have is the trust of their people. It doesn't matter how great your tactics are. If your sales team don't trust you have their best interests in heart, they're just not going to listen to you. And so that's 1/5. And then, you've got the timing, how consistent they are. Then there is tactics, but then there's also territory management and actually building talent and growing the team around you as well. So it's like, you're absolutely right. It's such a strange world we live in that people are promoted on the merit of only 1/5 of what sales leadership is.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of sales leaders also think that, becoming a sales leader, you have to then almost become a super rep and basically do the deals for all of your team, and that success is you managing their deals to, kind of make you all successful. And then you become this like empire lord trying to manage these deals. But I think it's also about role models and kind of looking up. I learned way too late in my career that you need to be the same person at work as you are at home. And you don't come home and kick on your high heels and your seat jacket and then like, right, that's that persona done with today. Now I can be fun Kate,
Yeah.
and I have to be work Kate and very serious. And that's really something I've worked on massively over the last few years is just being the same person, and who I am at home is who shows up at work, and take me or leave me,
In your 20s, like, you don't trust yourself. I didn't trust myself.
Yeah.
I was confident. I was taught by my parents to be confident. We didn't understand. I didn't understand that you couldn't do anything that you wanted to do. It wasn't in my lexicon. Failure was just like, no, of course I'm going to be able to do that as long as I work hard. Yes. That's what I was taught. But this whole, sort of trust in myself, can I really trust myself to be myself in front of everyone and for them to understand implicitly that I will work hard and I will be successful? They won't understand that, so I'll just keep that hidden. I'll be the person that I think that they expect me to be. And I think it's really, really difficult to tell a 20-year-old to be anything else. What we have to do as leaders is to support them by giving them the trust, by giving them this ground where we're authentic and we're saying, look, it's okay to mess up, it's okay to make mistakes, and you're not constantly saying passive aggressively, which everyone does, oh, did you not do that? It's about how do we verbalize when things go wrong? How do we show up even when we're under stress if someone hasn't done something? Or
how do you handle as a leader when you miss your quarterly number, or the number's not happening, or the numbers aren't where they need to be?
Oh, you're right.
Feeling the pressure and you're putting pressure back on your reps again.
Yeah, I think it's really full set. I think what you said there is really interesting, because it's really hard to be authentic and to have confidence when you look around a room and you don't see anyone that looks and sounds like you. And I think that's where you start to go into yourself and sort of doubt yourself. So going back to the topic we were discussing right at the beginning, we were talking about, I think a few of us felt more confident when we were 20 than maybe we did in our 20s and 30s. And possibly that's the very reason why, when we were surrounded with other people of a similar age, people from diverse backgrounds that were representative of our backgrounds, then we could be authentic and let our guard down and be really, really confident. And then that changes, doesn't it, when you get out to the workforce? And, we all went into, sales, technology and sales, that's an intersection for sure. And probably we were surrounded by people that we related to.
But also, going back to your point and Kate's point about sort of going into that first job, you're kind of the shock of someone else actually being just a bit of an ass, that they're under stress, they're under strain. You only get that over time with wisdom. You only get that, the confidence goes because you are put through the ringer in a series. You will absolutely be put in a situation where someone is unkind, rude, lies, wants you to be demoted, sees you as competition, sees you as easy pickings, potentially because you're female. It will still exists in the playgrounds today. I have small children, unfortunately, nothing has changed. It hasn't. And we're kidding ourselves if we think it has. It just absolutely has not. So you have to be resilient, but you also have to understand that you will go through these lessons and just pick them up, learn from them, and take on your learnings. But unfortunately, it will knock your confidence. It will guarantee to knock your confidence. But just try and find your mentors to support you through these moments, because you will feel low, dejected, rejected, insecure, like all of the above. You will feel it. I still feel it. We all still feel it, let's be honest, even in our positions.
I mean, that's what resilience is born out of, isn't it? It's very much like, muscles, grow because you're essentially kind of breaking, through the exercise, aren't you, the muscle tissue, and so it grows back stronger and bigger. Resilience is exactly the same. It's actually born out of those tough situations.
It probably comes from the word resistance. So I'm a scholar in Latin, listening along and thinking that resistance and resilience is probably linked together. Yeah, I bet it probably does. One for us to Google afterwards, yeah, for sure. But you kind of talked about some things that the topic sort of bordered on a hot topic, which is imposter syndrome. So the younger version of yourself, maybe I think we all still have imposter syndrome. I might, my belief is that it's a growth edge. You only get imposter syndrome if you're self-aware and you're growing. If you're not growing and you're not self-aware, you don't get it. But what would the advice be for the versions of yourself when you were younger, when you had that imposter syndrome?
I was using it to push me and drive me. I'm not sure if it's the best advice, but it's certainly what worked for me. So if I was worried about doing something, or someone told me I couldn't do something, I would go out and make.
Oh God, I used to love it when someone had. I remember this. There was this one instance with Penny. And I remember feeling devastated for her because somehow we'd heard back that this senior person in the team, a peer actually, had kind of, I don't know, said that she couldn't possibly do something, or there was something.
It was selling into, I had Merrill Lynch, or Bank of America Merrill Lynch as a client.
Do you remember this instance?
From another piece of software onto my account, and this was my bread and butter. I brought in millions from Bank of America Merrill Lynch for many years, and I sort of owned that account, all the key relationships. And he came in and said, so he was an American guy, walked in and said he'd been there like 10 minutes. I'm just telling you, he's in my office back in the day, we had offices. I'm telling you, I'm going to be in your account and I'm just going to be selling. So I'm selling data site. And I said to him, well, actually, I kind of own the account. It's like an enterprise model. I own it. No, I don't need your help. And he said, I can do this alone. And I said, I sat back in my chair and I went like this. You know what? There's a bit of competition coming on. I was like, goody. I said, I've got a super one actually. So I said, okay, go for it. I said, I'll see you on the other side. And that wasn't obviously very mature, and I wouldn't accept it. He went to sit down and be a team, but he was being a complete arsehole. So I just thought, you've told me I can't do this. You've told me you're going to come on my account.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, let's see. And he could see, he took a minute and he could see I genuinely was like, she was thrilled. Okay, that's it. I'm going to go for it. No, this is going to fuel me, fire me. And he just went, he went away, came back for a half an hour. I've been thinking, I might change this. Maybe we should work as a team. And I was like, no, I really think maybe we should just have a bit of fun with this. Yeah. And in the end, of course, we didn't. We worked as a team. And then we worked actually very, very well together. So to your point, sometimes when I have imposter syndrome, I have to own it. Yeah. I have to take control. Because when you're in control of something, instead of it controlling you, actually it changes the dynamic. And then I just have to talk to myself and say, right, I'm taking control of this. I'm going to do it and jump into it quite quickly so I can prove to myself that I can actually do it.
So I'm going to bring this back to sales a little bit now. I'm going to ask you a question, Kate, which is that if you were talking to your 20-year-old self about sales, is there a principle or tactical approach that you believe now that you would love yourself to know then, or maybe vice versa, something you would say, stop doing that? What would that be?
I think, back in the day, you have this perception of sales and what a salesperson is and how they sell, and you've got to negotiate and you've got to be, really tough. But I firmly believe that the only way now to be successful in sales is by being personalized. And there are too many messages that go out from people that are just so generic in terms of buy my widget for this reason or that reason, and you should buy this, without actually researching your customer. How do you know your customer? How do you know why they should buy? And ultimately, that level of research and personalization is demanded now. In a time where we expect everything to be personalised. You can't be sloppy. You can't be lazy with your customers. So you have to invest that time to get to know them.
Comes back to what you were saying before about hard work. You can't take shortcuts. The hard work compounds, right?
Yeah, and still even today, I mean, I'm doing a lot of, I work for a startup and I'm doing a lot of not cold outreach, but outreach, trying to land some messages, piquing interest, as I like to say, trying to pique interest of someone who may or may not be interested. And that will take me 15 minutes to put the perfect email. You have to be a wordsmith. And if you land it once, that 15 minutes is so well spent, because I'm almost 50-50 on getting some kind of response, if not then, next. So don't waste your time blasting out 100 emails when 1 or 2 personalised, well thought through, understood, clear messages will land.
Noticed how so much of sales advice comes from people that have worked at organisations where they carry a brand like Salesforce. So the recipient understands what they're getting. Whereas doing something like you're doing, it's not only that perhaps your brand is not necessarily known by the organisation you're selling to, but they don't know the concept yet. So you absolutely have to put that work in.
Correct. Yeah.
I would add something as well. Advice to people in selling is go see people in person and pick up the phone. Because I think there's a lot of reliance at the moment on social, on digital outreach, on email. But seeing the whites of eyes, make that effort to go and see someone in person if you're going to do a pitch. If you can, pick up the phone and speak to them instead of emailing them. If you can get a number, normally you can, because that really is underestimated in this generation. Because when someone sits in front of you, there is a natural connection that will happen. And people actually underestimate also the conversation that happens before the meeting. It might be in the lift going up, or in the foyer, or when you finish the meeting, you come out and say, oh, did you have a nice day? Or you might find out they've got kids, or that, something's happening. There's that conversation that happens around, and that whites of the eyes connection, because we are humans. And at the end of the day, the one thing, AI can come in, digitalization, efficiency can come in, but we are humans and we are built to connect with other humans. And I think we sometimes forget and get all too easy to hide behind the screen when we're selling.
And tying that point to your point about hard work, I heard a story from our CTO yesterday who is evaluating tools like Datadog, right? And he went to an event, saw Datadog, saw, I won't say which one, her competitor. He preferred the competitor, and the salesperson at the competitor followed up and he said, sorry, I'm just really busy at the moment. Get back in touch in a couple of weeks. Pretty normal, right? I think for a C-level person to do. In the meantime, the Datadog salesperson cold called him. Bear in mind that Datadog was not the preference from the demo he had on the stand. She cold called in, got his attention, and they are now probably 60-70% of the way through a sales process, right? And he's learned all these things that the demo wasn't representative of his needs at the event, but she's managed to do great discovery, and he's now vendor of choice, it would seem. But because he's doing his diligence, he's now going to have to go back to other vendor and say, hey, can you get back in touch? So to your point, hard work, connecting with people on the phone, a vendor went from being behind to being right in front.
Yeah, you should never underestimate as a seller your ability to be the differentiator. I've spent a number of years working in a company that wasn't the leader, in the category. We were definitely the number 2. And actually, it was my first role in leadership. So I took over an underperforming region, EMEA. And within a couple of years, we were the top performing region. And I think key to that was we formed a really great team. We spent a lot of time going in, learning about our customers' business and then using that through the process. And I think that really demonstrated, to those accounts how much we cared about them. We cared about the success of the project. And that ultimately became a differentiator. People wanted to spend more time with us as a team than they did our competitors' team. So I've always tried to land that with my sellers, like you can really be the different, because an emotional connection is such a difficult thing for a competitor to sell against.
There is one other point around this, actually, because I had this instance just yesterday with a younger client success person. And it was an interesting conversation because we're talking about knowing your KYC, knowing your client. But how you do that comes from asking questions. Now, if you're busy with your imposter syndrome and not really understanding what you should be doing or what you should know, you will refrain from asking questions or getting to know your client better because you're scared that the question that you're just about to ask is silly, stupid, or out of place, pits you as being not knowledgeable. Ask it anyway. Because what I have seen, I sell legal tech, so we sell into senior partners that are way into their career. You know, they charge thousands of pounds per hour. Every 10 minutes is really important. I've never ceases to amaze me how human beings will support human beings. If there is someone on the call that's junior and I'm like, shouldn't ask what due diligence means, or you shouldn't ask that question to someone, to an M&A lawyer, please don't ask. They always take the time. They always explain themselves. And you know what? It gives you greater insight and makes you respond. And this client success person, female that I was talking to just yesterday, I was saying, great demo, you did it incredibly. If we could all learn something, it's just about asking why. And maybe we could have done a little bit digging, me included. I'm putting my hand up. We could have done a little bit more digging because I've come off there feeling a little bit unsatisfied. We're going to have to go back and ask a few more questions. And maybe we could have tweaked our performance or even elevated it. If we'd just known a little bit more, we could have shown them exactly what they need. That why, have the confidence to do it anyway. 20-year-old self, have the confidence to do it.
And it comes to, I think it's being curious as well. So genuinely being interested in listening to the customer. So it's preparation, which you have to have done your due diligence to understand, what questions should we ask? Because I always say you don't want to seem like you're grilling the customer either. So it's like, what do we really need to know? What do we want to tell them in themes? And then what the intelligent questions we ask, and then really listening, and then not being afraid to silence. I always find it's a beautiful moment where they'll say something. You might ask a question. They'll say something. I just sit in the silence, go, and just because they'll invariably fill it with the next bit. And the next bit of the why is really what you care about. That's how they tell you is the next part. The first bit is usually kind of up here somewhere. But if you just keep in the moment of just sitting with it, they'll invariably fill it. And I always find that's a little bit of a tactic.
I love that. You talked a bit about tactics. A tactic that is common in sales is negotiation. But I want to talk about negotiation more from your career negotiation, things that you've had to do, advice you'd give to your younger self, whether it's negotiating the territory or comp plan or a new salary or a new role, something like that, because I think those are really important lessons we can only learn through trying, but hearing from people that have been through great careers you've had, I think would be very, very valuable.
Yeah, I think not being afraid, it comes back to authenticity again, not being afraid to be a human in a negotiation. I definitely have feedback over the years. I'd like to think I'm a good negotiator, but I've had feedback that I am. I think quite often I'm underestimated in a negotiation, and I learned, sort of early in my career, actually that was a huge asset. That was something that I could use to my advantage. So, a negotiation does not have to be adversarial. You can spend time finding out what's important to the other party. The best negotiations are it's not a zero-sum game. Everybody needs to come with an outcome that works for them and for their business. So I think actually spending time finding out what's important for them, explaining to them what's important to you, what are the things that are non-negotiables and what are the things that you're perhaps willing to give on, and then having a really constructive conversation. But I found the more sort of human, amicable, I was in those discussions, actually the more fruitful they were and the better deal that I got ultimately.
I have a hot tip that someone taught me very early on that actually it's a hot tip. Try it at home. But it works in your relationship as well. Sorry, my wife's going to kill me now. But someone very early on said, everything is emotional. We're all human beings. Okay, so when you're going into this negotiation, or it might not be a negotiation, it might just be you're going in to ask for a salary. It's a difficult conversation. If you go in and you name the feeling instantaneously, apparently there is something chemical that happens in another person's brain when they instantaneously, you go in and you say, I want to have a difficult conversation with you. I want you to know that I'm feeling very nervous and anxious about having this conversation with you. And something chemically apparently happens, and they relax and they say, no, please open up and share. And it gives you an open gate to talk in a relaxed way about what your needs are and what you would like. I feel embarrassed about this. I don't know whether I deserve it. I feel insecure about asking you. but I'm coming to ask you about a pay rise. I feel as though I deserve it because of X, Y, and Z. I don't need you to answer now, but I do need you to acknowledge that I've asked you about this. And you can have a more human conversation with someone who is not defensive that you've just asked for a pay rise. And equally, you don't feel like an imposter going, I want more money, which is what we're taught is negotiation, right?
That is so true, isn't it?
In sales negotiation and I like, if you think that price is going to be the issue, weave it into the value. So, you know, with customers, we'll be talking about, you know, and this is the value it's going to add to your business, and it's only going to cost you 3 million, but there's a great value because it's this, and you've set the expectation. Oh, okay, that's going to be 3 million. But we haven't talked about money yet. We'll come to that. But yeah, you know, 3 million, but we'll scope it. I'll do you a good deal, you know, and you kind of like squash it. Or if you're going in for a new job and you want a certain salary, you know, like, be upfront about it. You know, these are my salary expectations. Like, hope you can meet them. Tell me about the job. There's too many LinkedIn job adverts that's, you know, salaries not on there, and you have to go in and be like, if you want to talk to me, let's be really transparent. This is my salary. And my husband does this really openly all the time. He goes in and says, well, if it doesn't start with a 2, you know, and I'm like,
this is less of a male issue. Yeah, to be frank. I mean, so you're exactly right. It's more, they'll go in and just say what they want, right? And why they're good for it.
But again, scope yourself out. I mean, you need to do your market research. You should know how much how much these jobs are going for. Go in and understand your market and your worth and your rate.
One thing that really resonated with me when you were talking about how at 20 actually, or younger in your lives, you didn't have, not, I won't call self-doubt, it's quite a strong word, but that self-doubt, and it was because you're surrounded by like-minded people. And then as you come out of university, as you mentioned you would, you take your step into the career, the workplace, where you've gone from having people of your own, you know, your own people around you, same age, same stage of life, to having people all the way to retirement. You know, your boss was, you said they're going to retire, right? So you've got this massive spectrum all of a sudden of different people, some that you look up to, some that expect you to look up to them, and you shouldn't, because they're not good people, they haven't got, you know, they're overrated. And so I felt like that was like a really interesting thing that kind of resonated with me, what you're saying, which is like a lot of where the self-doubt came from. You're looking out and seeing all these different people, and people that, you know, you're further away from those who your clique can give you confidence.
I think wherever you have intersectionality, that's just amplified, isn't it? So anyone that belongs to an underrepresented group, you know, has that greater level of self-doubt and imposter syndrome and so on. So, you know, I guess when we went into the workplace, you know, we were female, we were suddenly surrounded by people, of lots of different ages. I'd never really kind of rationalised it.
Yeah, me neither. No, yeah.
I agree. When you said it, I thought, I haven't thought of it that way. I think there's one example story that you will remember when I say it, that I think articulates this beautifully about how people could feel. We ran a think group for, is that a word? A think group for female sales leader. And it was an evening that we hosted at Sushi Samba, and we invited a round table up. And there were only you and 2 other guys there, right? And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it ended up being the case. And so we went around the table, and Andy, and then there was 2 really exceptional VPs in playbook companies there. So we went around the table, and everyone had to introduce themselves, answer fun facts, etc. And we got to one of the guys who contributed to the book, and he, again, very successful. He stood up and he said, do you know, I've been feeling a little bit uneasy about standing up. And he said, I present all the time. I never have an issue talking in public, but I was trying to figure out, why am I feeling uneasy? He said, I suddenly realised it's because I might say something wrong, because I'm one of the few men in the room. And he said that I had very quickly after thinking that, this lightning bulb moment where I was like, oh, that must be what women feel like. He didn't know. Why would he know? Why would he know how that feels? Because I was never in that situation. And then he was like, I just felt this discomfort. And then should I modify what I say? Well, he's actually very good. He's got a 50-50 team. He's very good in his diversity anyway. He has team. But yeah, just that fact that you always want to put everyone through that experience to then suddenly get that epiphany moment. Some will, some won't, like. But I thought that was quite interesting.
That's a really great story.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.